Alright, boys and girls, today's lesson is lesson 9-1, fractions, decimals, and percents. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to say, I can name the whole or the one, something we've worked on a lot in the past. I can solve percent of problems. That means we'll look at something and we'll say, this is the so many percent of whatever the whole or whatever the one might be. And I can rename fractions with denominators of 100 as decimals. And that's something we've done in the past also. That's when the denominator is, you want the denominator to be 100. And if the denominator is 100, it's pretty easy to rename the fractions. So for starters, I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to talk about a student. Say, Tom, I'm going to write this down. Tom received 50% of the vote. Okay? Ways that you can say this, other ways that you could also restate this. You could say, for every 100 votes, Tom got 50 of them. Or you could say, if 100 people voted, Tom got 50 of the votes. Okay, another way you could say it is Tom got 50 out of every 100 votes cast. Or you could say Tom got 50 of the 100 votes. Those are different ways you could say it. Remember that this means 50. Well, just know that 50 out of 100. Let me write this down. Erase this a little bit. Remember that 50 out of 100 does not mean that exactly 100 votes were cast. Okay? It doesn't mean that there were 100 votes. Okay, but it means that Tom got 50 votes for every 100 votes that were cast. Okay? So basically 50 out of 100 equals 1/2. So what it's saying is he got half the votes. So if he got 60, if there were 60 votes and he got 30 of them, he got half the votes. If there were 200 votes, then he would have gotten 100 of the votes. That is telling you that he is getting half the votes. 50 out of 100 is what it would look like when you write the percent of 50. So remember that just as with fractions, a percent always represents a percent of something. The something is the whole 100%, which is the entire object, or the entire collection of objects, or the entire quantity being considered. In the example, the whole or the one is the total number of votes cast. The total number of votes cast is 100% of the voters. Okay, it's not necessarily 100 votes, it's 100% of the voters. Okay, so our whole class votes, say we have 22 kids in our class, if we vote, 22 votes would equal 100% of the class. So to get 50% of the votes, which would be half of the votes, how many votes would Tom have to get in our class? Hopefully you all said 11 out of 22, because that would equal 50%. Okay, so that would be 50 out of the 100% of the class. 50%, so we would say that 100% of the votes, which would be 22, he got half of them, which would be the same as 50 out of 100. Okay, so now what I want you to do is go to page 248 in your math journal, and we are going to work on this together. We're going to talk about how decimals and fractions and percents all kind of mean the same. Alright, so on this first part here, we are going to fill in the 100% box on the example, for the example. So it says, show the percent by shading the 10 by 10 grid. This is the 10 by 10 grid. You've seen these millions of times. Then write other names for the percent next to the grids. So last season, Duncan made 62% of his basketball shots. So the 100% would be all of his shots, okay? Because they made 62% of them, but we want to know all of the shots. So that would be 62 out of every 100 shots. The fraction would be 62 out of 100, and the decimal name would be 0.62 or 62 100ths. All right, for the next one here, I'm going to fill it in for you, and then you all are going to try to figure it out. All right, so Steve ate 25% of his cookies. So 100% would be all of Steve's cookies. Now that you have 100%, you know you could use the 10 by 10 grid. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is, because it's 25% of them, you're going to want to fill in 25 of the little squares. And you know there's 10 in each because it's a 10 by 10. So we'll say 10. We'll say 20. And then we have to chop the third one in half to give me 5 to make it 25 out of every 100. Fraction name would be 25 over 100. The decimal name would be point. Sorry, I guess I'll put a 0 for 0.25. So it says 25 100ths. Okay, I'm going to do another one for you, and then I want you to work on this on your own. Alright, so the example is Jada scored 37% of her team's goals. Okay, I want you to fill in this on your own, and then I want you to fill in the 10 by 10 grid and all of these answers here. So pause it, and then when you're done, I'm going to go over them with you. Alright, so hopefully for the 100%, this would be all of Jada's team's goals. Okay? Because that would be the 100%, all the goals. Okay, you don't know how many goals were scored, but you can at least get a percentage from this. Okay, next up you should have filled in 37 of these. So I know there's 10 in one row, so I can fill in 1, 2, a little sloppy, sorry. Here's 3 of them, so I have 30 here if there's 10 in each. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Block them off. Okay. So here I have 37 out of every 100. Okay, the fraction would be 37 out of 100. The decimal would be 0.37. Okay, remember, this doesn't mean that her team scored 100 goals. That just means she scored 37% of their goals. So if there were 100 goals scored, she would have scored 37 of them. Alright, so on the next page, page 249, this is the same thing we just did, but it has examples already in there for you. So let's do the first one together. It says 12% of the students in Marshall School are left-handed. So our 100% would be all of the students. Okay? All of the students at Marshall, not just the people that are left-handed. Okay? So you would fill in 10, and then 2 more to make it 12. Okay? This grid just kind of helps you see what it would be out of 100. Doesn't mean that Marshall School only has 100 kids and that 12 of the 100 are left-handed. This just tells you that out of all the kids in Marshall, 12% is left-handed. We're just doing this so you understand how you go from fraction to decimal. So this means 12 out of every 100. Okay, every 100. Okay, so if there were 200 kids, there'd be 24 left-handed kids. If there were 300 kids, there'd be 36 left-handed kids. That's what it's saying, 12 out of every 100. So the fraction would be 12 out of 100. The decimal would be 0.13. Alright, so I want you to work on the next 2 on your own, and then we're going to go over them together. So pause it and work on them. Alright, so next one hopefully you said Sarah spelled 80% of the words correctly on her test. Your 100%, meaning all of it, would be all of the words. Okay, you have spelling tests all the time. You get this. So, all of the words. So, if she spelled 80% of them correctly, we know we're going to fill in 8 of these lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so we're going to fill in everything from this over. Okay, I'm not going to fill the whole thing in for you. That gives you the idea. It's all this. And you're only leaving 2 rows of 10. So, that tells you that she scored 80 out of every 100 correct. Okay, the fraction name would be 80 out of 100, and the decimal would be 0.80 or just 0.8, whatever you want to do. Hopefully you got that one correct. Next one, cats sleep about 58% of the time. So, the 100% would be all minutes in one day. Okay, I know it says of the time. Well, we're talking daily. We're not doing in the entire lifetime, which it would work out as the same for that, but we're going to do daily just to kind of make it a little bit easier to understand. So, to fill in the 10 by 10 grid, you're going to fill in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then almost all of them with another one. We're only doing 8. So, that is 58 out of 100. Fractions, 58 over 100. The decimal's 0.58. Alright, so now I want you to go back to your desk, and I want you to work on Math Journal page 250 on your own.